What's up guys, how are you guys doing today? We are gonna look at how to create the hypnotic rings using the GLSL shader. So it's gonna be a creative coding program that we are gonna do today. I'll explain you what this code is, and by the end of this project we'll be creating this hypnotic rings. So if you're excited and ready to dig in, let's get started. Alright, to get started, for the shader programming, what we'll do is go to this website called shader.place. Awesome work or contribution by Charles Stills, and that's how I actually learned about shader in the very first place as well. So we'll go to the room code adjacent, and if you see anything, we'll just remove everything inside the main function. So make sure you have this code, definitions of the memory space, because the uniform is actually a shared memory between CPU and GPU, and everything that we do would be inside this main void. Okay, it looks very much like C kind of programming language. So the basic idea of the shader is we'll put in the details or coordinates of the pixel, and the output would be in some sort of color. So you put in a location of a pixel and you get some sort of output in a form of color, and that's why it is creative coding. Okay, so the very first thing that I will be doing is paste it here, and I'll define what that means. These are some of the code that will be, most of the time this is boilerplate code. So basically what I'm doing is I'm getting a vector2, which is basically defining and I'm normalizing the coordinate by the resolution of my screen. So basically this would be 0 0 and then 1 1. Basically that's what I'm doing. Okay, and then what I can do is, to visualize it, I will give a vector4 type of color, and then I can do vec4 and norm coordinate, and then 1, and then I can say gl underscore frac color equals color. Alright, there it is, your very first shader. Actually this is, I will tell you, this is red, RGB and alpha. So if I were to put this, right now it's blue, so if I were to put it to 0, you'd see red and then the green. Okay, so black, which is here at the bottom left, is 0 0, and then the right is the mix of the green and red, which is yellowish, which is weird for me for some reason. Okay, next, if you see, the project that we wanted to do was actually build those hypnotic rings, and the rings originate from the center. To do that, what we want to do is actually convert this to some sort of center form. Right now your 0 0 is actually starting at the bottom left. So to do that, this is basically, I'm converting my UV system. So basically what I will do is I'll say, hey UV, let's do this, and then let me see if there's something I did mistake. I think basically I need to do a vector2 for UV. Okay, now what we are doing here is we are converting it to, we are basically bringing the center 0 0 to the center. This would be 1 1, this would be -1 -1. Okay, so let's visualize that by UV. Alright, there it is. You see the black portion, we are at the center. Okay, here is actually our starting point, 0 0. After we are done with that, so this was the very first shader. Now let's actually start with the I'll start with 1 1 to give you an example of what this is. Okay, so basically this is red, blue, green, everything's 1. That means everything is white. Okay, and this A is alpha channel, which is basically the transparency, and we don't want to deal with that at the moment. Now to make the hypnotic circle, we already have the center we'll use a polar coordinate which uses the angle and radius. So we'll use the radius as the center of the radius at the length of the UV. Okay. Now what we can do is float radius is equal to length, and then it will be UV. Okay. Length is actually defined already, so it's a built-in function. Now what this is basically doing is all the points around that center we are getting it, and if we were to visualize it using this I actually don't need this. There you go. You see the center, right? Very dark circle, dark black in the center, and then as you go out, it's fading. Okay. Now, to animate anything in a shader or maybe outside of it too, the animation is basically movement of something over the time. But since the time is ever increasing, we need to have something that goes through the loop of high and low. That is the top and the bottom. So rise and fall. So that would be a behavior of a sine or cosine. Okay. So what we can do is we can say another variable called rings, and that would be a sine of radius. And so if I were to do rings, it's just basically fading out over, you know, the sine is basically fading out. Now if I were to put time plus, and I was getting some error when I was trying to put a time. Looks like we haven't defined a time. So actually let's define a time of float type. Float time equals to u underscore time. So basically this would give us a time, but this is too fast, so let's divide that by 5, and then you'd see, actually we need to give this 5.0 because this is very specific to, you know, the float, because it's instead of 5. And now you see that as the time is progressing, you can see the circle moving in. Okay. Yeah, this is cool and this is getting us somewhere, but we need to actually have those concentric rings though. So to get the rings, what we can do is we can multiply the UV by 10. Okay. Now we should see, actually let me put that because I think I made a mistake of putting, oh, ta-da, there it is. We have those hypnotic rings. Okay. Now since we are adding this with the sign inside, we are adding with the time, what we can do is we can actually subtract it from the time. So, and this is what we are looking for. So we are finally able to get the hypnotic rings using shader. So to recap, what we did was we basically got a coordinate and we normalized it using the resolution. Then we got a time using this global variable of u underscore time. And also another thing that we did was we actually tried to basically made the center of the screen as a 0, 0 point by using this. And to get the radius, what we did was we used a length function for this UV, and to get the rings to propagate over time, what we did was we added or subtracted with the radius of what we got here. And finally, to visualize, we used the vector for color, vector for ring. Basically this is visualizing all of this stuff, and finally it rendered using this function. So in overall, this was your very first shader. Hopefully you liked it, and to keep continuing with that, subscribe to this channel and I'll be making more contents.